Welcome, and I'm Emily, the CEO of MISP. Lovely to see old faces, young faces, everything in between, and new folk to this. We're very excited that Vic is joining us. I'm literally going to hand over to my colleague Faiy Rushton, our Education and Training Development Manager, who is going to guide us through this session and welcome Vic officially. So thank you, Faiy.
Thank you. So yes, hi everyone. Really lovely to see you. I'm the Education and Training Development Manager at Mindfulness in Schools project. And I was lucky enough to meet Vic at a Warrington Wellbeing Conference that was a governors conference back in September. He is the CEO of Passmores Co-operative Learning Community, featured on Educating Essex, and has written a book called The Best Job in the World about working in education. So a really warm welcome, Vic, and lovely to have you here with us this evening. I really appreciate you giving your time like this.
Absolute pleasure and a privilege to be asked. So thank you, Faiy. Thanks for the invite. I've been looking forward to it all day. As I said to you just before, I've had a long day. This is the highlight, so I'm looking forward to it.
That's really nice to hear. Thank you. So the theme then for this evening's chat is around whole school culture and compassion within whole school culture. And you're known for compassionate leadership in challenging times. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about how you came to kind of have that as a sort of phrase connected with you.
Yeah. So just a little context for those that didn't watch a TV program all those years ago, and for most of you haven't no clue who I am. So we are a trust of 6 schools in Harlow, so all very closely within walking distance of each other. 4 are primary, 2 are secondary. We also have 3 nurseries and 2 autism specialist provisions. Again, all within Harlow. When back in the day when Educating Essex was filmed, which I think was 13 years ago now, 14 is a long time ago, we were just a standalone school. And since that point, we've obviously not through any not through any planning become a multi-academy trust, because I'm not a fan of academies or multi-academy trusts, but it just so happens the nature of that's where we needed to go. I feel I was very privileged at school. So I come from a council estate in South East London. I know more of my friends in prison than I do out of prison from those days. I've been to the funerals of a couple of them, and I think that growing up in that environment with a mum and a dad who were invested in my future and my life. You know, my dad, a plumber, barely literate, if I'm honest, reading and writing wasn't his strength, but he ended up being chair of governors at my secondary school. My mum, who was the academic of the house, used to work for NATO, etc. But like lots of women of her generation, gave up her career to raise her family. But they would turn up to the opening of an envelope if I was involved in it. And, you know, I felt very fortunate with that. And, you know, it didn't go amiss on me that when I looked around my friends, they weren't in the same place as that. So I was fortunate, with my family, but also with the school I went to, and, you know, partly because my parents were involved. I'm sure I got some better treatment than others. But I was really well looked after. I'm a PE teacher by training. PE and maths is my two areas. I always had maths because I knew one day I'd be too old and too fat to do PE, so I had maths to fall back on. But my PE staff were, if I wanted to be there, they were there. They allowed me to change my future. They allowed me to make different choices. And so I always had a sense of owing. I always had a sense of I needed something to pay back. But I also knew that I'd seen, because I went to school in the 80s and the 70s. I'd also seen some of my friends just, you know, forgotten about. They weren't treated in the same way as me. I could see that, you know, they didn't have the family support and family pushing the staff to look after me and make sure I was doing my work, etc. And so it was always a thing for me to remove the chance factor of young people. They have a chance, you know, who you're born to. It makes a difference. And so that was always there. And then I actually came across a phrase when I was studying my A levels from called unconditional positive regard, which is from Carl Rogers. And if you haven't come across that, the Wikipedia entry is actually quite good on it. And Carl Rogers talked about treating people beyond their actions. So, just for context, Carl Rogers was a psychotherapist working with some of the most despicable human beings on the planet, child rapists and murderers. And what he said, his theories he came up with was that I need to look beyond what they've done because I need to help them. I need to accept the fact that they're human and they've made mistakes, even if their mistakes are absolutely hideous. And I need to deal with them beyond that and go beyond the moment of disruption or the moment of poor choice to the place where I can help them again, help them make better choices. And that was a phrase that had always been with me. And I was quite, I'm a white man. All white men are ambitious because they think they can run the world. I was always ambitious to be a head teacher. That was always the plan from being an NQT. I knew that I wanted to be. My plan was always to be a head by 40 and out the door at 55. That was always the plan. I'm now 56, so that bit hasn't worked. But I did become a head in my late 30s. So for me, that it was a chance to live what I thought for many years. It was a chance to create an environment of empathy and of young people being willing to accept the fact they don't need to be the star of every scene of their life. And I went through a variety of schools. I did lots of schools over a few years. I did 3 years in the Middle East in Cairo, which I loved, in a private fee-paying school, which if I'd given them a book and said, learn that, they'd have said, by when, sir, rather than anything else. And then I found myself back in Harlow, in what is a predominantly white British working class town. It's right-leaning in lots of ways, even though we now have a Labour MP, but three UKIP councillors. It was number 2 on Nigel Farage's list of where to stand. I received 3 death threats and 35 legal notices in lockdown because I was an agent of the government, and they were from people who were trusting me with their children. So I found a place where I could make a difference. I found a place where these young people didn't realise how brilliant they were and how brilliant they could be. And so it gave me an opportunity. And so I went from assistant head, deputy head, all at Passmores, and now the CEO of the trust, because I found somewhere where we could make a difference. And I was just fortunate that I got to the school at the same time as other people with a similar mindset, and you find your comrades in arms. So for me, a lot of it is about my own background and realising how lucky I was to escape where I was, but also just the realisation really that I was lucky, but every child should have that same potential, have that same opportunity. And so I got to do a job that I love. And, I wrote The Best Job in the World 13 years ago. It was the best job in the world. I actually don't particularly like my current job. I'm the CEO of the trust, so I'm not as connected to the children as I was. And I hate that. But I also didn't want anybody else coming in and ruining what we were doing. So it's a part of its background, part of its education. And I think a lot of it is just a bit of bloody mindedness, actually, that I'm refused to let people be put on the waste tip, because that could have been me.
It sounds like you've really kind of purposely decided that, whatever background children have, whatever needs they might have, that you want to create an environment in which everyone can flourish and thrive. And that's just, really sort of really inspiring to hear.
Yeah, I mean, we don't serve our community. No, our community doesn't serve us. We serve our community. We don't choose who comes to our school. They choose us. And, and I say to parents at open evening, in September when they're choosing their school, the biggest compliment we will get in the next 12 months is if you choose our school. Not if Ofsted come, I don't care. Not if, some other, whoever, Bridget Phillipson comes to visit, the Prime Minister. We've had all of those people come to visit over the years. Actually, when a parent comes to open evening, here's what we've got to say, walks around the school and talks to our children and goes, I trust these people, then actually we need to nurture and cherish that, because that's an amazing thing. Because I know I don't trust many people with my own child, or I didn't. I made choices about that, and so it's a privileged position to be in. So therefore, you work. I think having a purpose is a privilege, and so we saw in lockdown when people lost their purpose how difficult they found life. And I never lost that. In fact, during lockdown, I could have done with a little bit less purpose if that was possible, because it was a bit too much. But yeah, I think if to go through your working life feeling that what you're doing is a privilege is amazing. So I feel lucky.
Yeah, yeah. I have sort of the fortunate, I'm in the fortunate position that I've been into lots of different schools, primaries and secondaries, doing this work where I go in and teach mindfulness in lots of settings. And I'm always curious when I go into schools to get a feel for what the culture in the school is like. And I was wondering what you think kind of signs of a really sort of happy or healthy whole school culture are, things that when you visit, you kind of go, yes, this is.
Yeah. It's really interesting because there are Stepford schools these days. There are Stepford, like Stepford Wives. There are Stepford schools these days where you go into them and you get the most amazing welcome with children with their arms by their side saying, "It's lovely to have you here this afternoon, sir." And I look at that and I go, I can understand why that's alluring. I can understand why if you didn't know what was going on, that would feel great. Whereas actually, I go into my school and it feels quite noisy and it feels quite busy and it feels like there's lots of children doing lots of things. And for me, that's how school should feel. That's, I don't want my school sanitized. I call break time vibrant. That's what I call it. Other people call it chaotic. I call it vibrant because we are one building school. So it's one enormous circular building. So the children spend a lot of time in it because they don't, we've got the sun outside, but they spend a lot of time inside. So we get to see them. And so for me, I think there are some really clear clues for me around whether the school's a good environment. Go to the toilets. I think that's always one of my first things. Go to the children's toilets, without the children in it preferably, but go to the children's toilets. Because for me, if I wouldn't use it, I shouldn't expect them to use it. That's those little things around a building where you go, when we go to a service station, we expect a certain level of service in the toilets. We expect schools are worse than service stations often. Well, that's not good enough, if we haven't got that space right, when our children are at their most vulnerable, because that's where they are in the toilets. Passmores moved buildings in 2011, so we went from an old campus style, spread out buildings to a one building place, and we spent a lot of time designing the toilets, bizarrely. And because the young people who were working with us on the design said we'd got it wrong before. They said that no floor to ceiling doors, so they always felt vulnerable because of things like these. And we had them in year groups, and what they said was, so whenever we go into the toilet, there's a couple of things we know and a couple of things we don't know. We don't know who's going to be there, my best friend or my worst enemy, but we do know you're not. We do know that there's not going to be a teacher there to look after us if anything goes wrong. And that's when I'm at my most vulnerable. And that's why we have so many issues with specifically girls, not going to the toilet and infections that happen because of that. So I always visit the toilets. The biggest thing the children do is, do they feel like children? Do they talk like children? Do they behave like children? Are they still allowed to be children? Because I don't want to go to a primary school and see a bunch of robots who show me around the school beautifully. But I do think there's, if it's like choosing a house. Everybody's ever had to move a house. You walk into a house, oh, this is nice. This feels like me. I'm very happy to go with my gut. There's a school opposite my house here, which we didn't send my child to because we walked in it and went, no, it's not right. It's just not right. Whereas the school that was obviously the most awkward to get to was right. So I think you can feel it. Do the children genuinely smile at the staff and at each other? My children, I think, are pleased to see me when they see me. They're not fearful of me. When I enter a room, the last thing they do is stand up. They might lift their head up and go, answer, and then they'll be getting on with their work. That's healthy. Does the school feel healthy? Because if it doesn't, then there's the only thing that matters to me is, will my child be happy? Because I know that as a dad, I'm his most important teacher along with his mum. Whereas if in school, when he's spending that time in that social setting, I just want him to be happy. And so I would choose a happy school, the school he's going to be happiest at or she's going to be happiest at, and then worry about the results later because they'll come.
Yeah, so it's a kind of atmosphere then you're sort of describing.
Yeah, definitely. Don't go to lessons. Go and stand and watch them at break. You know, that's the thing for me. Whenever a parent asks to visit the school, I say, yeah, okay, come at this point and we'll finish the tour with break, so you can see them completely without any control from me and how they treat each other. Are they respectful? Are they, you know, that you've got to see them in their natural element, I think, because when Ofsted are in there, they're nailed to their chairs. They are opening doors. They are they are doing everything they're supposed to do because they're proud of their schools too. However, is that normal? No, of course it's not.
When we had a discussion before, you mentioned, I think you called it the heart space.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could just share a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah.
What it's for.
So if you can imagine, our school is a hand, basically. So here's the front entrance, and you go in, and here's the heart space, and each of these fingers is a wing where lessons are taught, basically. At the top of the heart space is inclusion. So the highest point in our building, and the part where everything else permeates off, is inclusion. It's not hidden down a corridor. It's not down the end of not in the basement. It's at the highest, most vocal and obvious point in the school. So what we created badly was we now have a lovely school to lap. So our young people, you know, between lessons, we'll see how many laps they can get around the heart space. But the heart space for me was about me every hour of every day being able to step out from my office, look over the balcony, and to see our children, to see them moving from one lesson to the other, to see them interacting. If you've never seen a secondary school changeover, there's a huge amount of hugging that goes on, an enormous amount of hugging, and wishing you good luck for your maths lesson. It's like you're going into battle often. And just, you know, I use the phrases, we make the weather with our staff. You know, if we smile, they smile, we shout, they shout, we're angry, they're angry. And actually, I can test the weather every hour just by walking out my office, looking at the heart space, and seeing how the kids are and seeing how it feels that day. And so that's really key. So it also allows us, so if I want to, we do a lot of whole school assemblies, and I know lots of schools don't like getting all their children together. It's a hassle. Well, for us, actually, with that space, I've got a nice high bing bongs. I've got a bing bong that goes into every classroom. And I say, the heart space assembly, see you there in 5. And year 11, join me on the upper walkway, and the year 7 to 10 stand down there. And we can do that in 5 minutes. And that was a really big thing for me. So if as a school, somebody's letting us down, or we're letting a group of people letting us down, well, I'm going to get us all together to talk about that, because it's not me they're letting down, it's us. But also, if somebody's doing something brilliant and we're really proud of them, we'll get together. You know, Remembrance Day, we have a bugler that comes in and stands in that heart space with all the children, plays the reveille, plays the last post, plays the reveille. It's a stunning thing to see, because it's children being collectively just managing, you know, a really challenging environment. You know, imagine we've got 25, 26 children with autism in that space as well, who are anxious about noise. So that heart space is literally the heart of the school, and gives us our chance to feel how our day's going. Just sitting in the heart space, watching kids go past. If you're at Passmores at the end of the day at 3:20, it's like Starbucks. They all stand and have a coffee, and we make sure there's cakes and biscuits and stuff. And then we'll have 250 children just sitting in the heart space having a coffee or hot chocolate normally before they go home. And that for me is key. You know, we open at 7 in the morning, 7 days a week. We close at 10 at night, 7 days a week. We close for Christmas Day, Boxing Day, New Year's Day. Apart from that, we're open. We have sessions where we've got a group that do just a stop and chat session on a Saturday, so 12 till 2. Anybody walking past the school who fancies a chat and coffee, there'll be somebody there having a chat and a coffee with them. We're a community resource. We're paid for by community money. We're paid for by the wages and the taxes and the interest and all the other things that our community has paid. And so they deserve access to it. So the heart space is really about us. It's at the core of us. That's what it is. And inclusion is in the middle of the middle.
Yeah, thank you for sharing about that. It kind of made me think actually about some of the things that you shared before about belonging, about kind of people feeling like they have role, you know, and you talked about purpose, but it's quite key as well, isn't it, to kind of the well-being of the young people that you work with, that they feel they belong. I think
belonging is such a powerful aspect of what we do. I think if any of you are interested, if any of you are anyway sporty into your rugby, there's a book called Belonging by a rugby coach, Owen Eastwood, his name is, and he's a Maori, and he talks about how human beings are healthier when they feel like they belong. They are healthier. They contribute more. You know, they're more efficient. They're better at their jobs. And he uses a phrase called whakapapa. It's spelled with a W, but it's said whakapapa, which is a Maori word, which talks about our place in history and how that sense of family is one that we feel now. But I'm really aware that I stand on the shoulders of giants with my school. I wasn't the first head. I won't be the last head. My job is to take the legacy of what's happened and to create something better for the future, and for the person who comes in after me to take that to their stage. But that sense of pride that comes with, belonging and pride are not hugely different to each other at times, because if you belong to something, you generally feel a sense of connection and pride of it. For me, that's getting our young people to understand that they're important to us, that this is where they're going to be safe, and that's regardless of the choices they make. That's regardless of the choices. That's regardless of who they are, who they think they are. They belong with us, and if there's an issue of somebody that needs to, doesn't feel like they can, let's say, go to the same changing rooms as their friends, then we'll solve the problem. Do you know what I mean? It's not for us to impose on them. It's for us to go, okay, that's not the norm as we've got it. How are we going to work together to solve that issue? I had a transgender PE teacher who came to the school as a female and came back to the school as a male PE teacher. Now, you can imagine that the potential for that to be used against that person, against that member of staff, against him, was huge. But also, he was aware that that would be difficult for some of our families. He was aware of that. And because we always spoke openly, for him being called Terry female to coming back to being Terry male, we spoke throughout that process. Nothing ever changed, and that for me, that openness of communication, that way where a child goes, look, I've done something and it could be great, it could be rubbish, but I need to tell you about it because that's what we do. Creating that in a school and creating that with all of our young people is really challenging, but should be our aim.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a kind of openness about recognising when things aren't working, when things are working, having chats about it. Yeah, so it doesn't feel like something to be afraid of if things are working.
It's destigmatising that thing. I something's different for me than it is for other people. Be that I'm in a wheelchair, be that I feel I'm not having a good day. It doesn't. That's fine. It's about us being respectful of that, and them understanding that we're not going to sit in judgment of them. And that's, I think, the biggest thing we've got. The world is more judgmental than it's ever been. Too many people are too interested in other people's lives rather than saying, you do you, I'll do me, we'll be good. That sort of conversation is one that, we can see that Facebook, we can see that, how many people want to share an opinion on X on something. Actually, is my life affecting your life when I'm living in Essex and you're living in Birmingham? No, not really. So you do you and be happy and I'll do me. But that isn't the norm, unfortunately. And for our young people, I worry that the millennials and the Gen Alphas that are coming through with our schools, they're 2010, the iPad was born, and 2010 is when Gen Alpha was born. And actually losing that sight where young people see, and I can see whether you're interested, if you're happy, if you're sad, if you're angry, if something's not right. I can see that because I can read your face. It worries me that our young people become less and less perceptive of each other and how they feel and how somebody else feels. And that's our job. We don't allow them to have phones. It's really, and we shouldn't, because we want them to talk to each other. That's it. We're not going to say you can't have it to keep safe, but we're saying if you're sitting in the heart space at lunchtime, you're not looking at your phone, you're looking at each other, and it's probably the least popular school rule we've ever had in our lives, but it's still the right one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, just kind of coming back to, I mean, we're talking about whole school culture, but back to kind of like, is it by design or does it kind of evolve organically? Who does that? Who creates it? Is it a top-down thing or a grassroots up thing?
It's universal. It has to be universal. You have to start with the universal. If you're going to change anything in the world, it should never start at the top, as far as I'm concerned. Inclusion, so inclusion is a big thing in schools. Inclusion has to be universal. It has to start at the bottom, but be supported by the top. That's where it has to be. And so for me, I look at our systems that we have put in place that create those opportunities for that. So we have vertical tutoring at one of our secondary schools, for instance. So they arrive in year 7, they're put into dragon, griffin, lion, or unicorn. It all sounds very Harry Potter. It's as close to Harry Potter without broomsticks as you can get, and in that tutor group will be their brothers and sisters if they're at the school already. Unless mum and dad or whoever's looking after them goes, don't put them in there, they'll kill each other. We might then put them somewhere else. But generally, we would put siblings in the same class. We would try to put cousins and other family members in the same environment. And they'll be mixed 7 to 10. And actually, me as a year 7, I'll be given a year 9 to be my partner, my learning partner for the year. And that year 9 will look after me. They'll make sure before I leave tutor time, I've got every bit of equipment that I need. That year 9 gets nothing for that. All they get is to help another human being. And for me, that's a big part of it. What we reward is a big part of it. There's lots of small, deliberate decisions that go to build a culture, I think. For those that have probably read Simon Sinek's, What's My Why? He talks about the fact that once you've decided why you're doing something, your what and your how have to follow that. What I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it are going to live with my why. They're not going to be clashing with each other. And so things like, what do we reward as school leaders? I think if you go on Mumsnet and you read put school rewards in it, you'll find a lot of parents who are very unhappy with how schools reward people. 100% attendance awards. Well, my son could never get a 100% attendance award ever. My son was in hospital in Great Ormond Street Hospital within 6 hours of being born. He had 7 operations in the first year of his life. He had to go to Great Ormond Street every 3 months. He was never going to get a 100% attendance award. Now, he had me as dad who would go, don't worry about it, boy. We'll sort through that, and explain that to him. For others, they feel resentment. It's not my fault. I've got something I've got to go and get sorted out without my choice. So that's another deliberate decision. We don't reward things like that, which are divisive. We don't have non-uniform days because actually our young people, that creates a huge amount of anxiety, and actually they want to feel the same because it hides deprivation. So I wouldn't say it's not one big decision. It is a series of lots of little decisions that all build together. And the moment we make a decision that clashes with that culture, we can feel it. Sometimes we've gone through with them and we've gone, oh, that doesn't feel right now, does it? And had to unpick stuff, and that's okay. But it's not one decision. It's accumulation of lots of decisions for me. We have non-gender specific toilets. They've got floor to ceiling doors, for instance. So nobody feels that they can't go in one toilet or another. They can go into any toilet. We don't have disabled toilets. We have a handful of them, but anybody can use them, for instance. Those small decisions which allow young people to feel that they're not an outsider is key. Those little things are the key things for me, not the big things. It's not I'm going to decide that we're not going to do this. It's cumulative.
I was just thinking as well about staff then, and kind of when you recruit staff into your settings, is there a kind of sort of a bit hit and miss around whether or not you feel like fit with your culture, fit with
It's interesting because I have a whole trust conference every January. The last Friday in January, I get all the staff together, and I do about 6 or 7 slides which are identical every January without fail. I call them my plate spinners. So I do a slide on unconditional positive regard. I do a slide on what's our default setting when things go wrong? Do we look in the mirror for what we can change first before we wonder what anybody else can change? There's a few sort of messages that I would keep going every year. What was really interesting is just before lockdown, I appointed a deputy head, and on paper was going to be great. We then had lockdown, so I had 3 years with no staff conference. I had 3 years with no messaging being repeated. No, this is what's important and this is why we do it. And I was struggling with him. We came out of lockdown and he was not behaving in the way I would, So if we've got a rule, there's no coats on in school, a kid will come in, they've got their coat on, and I'll go, Billy, take your coat off. Come on, you know the rules. They go, oh, sorry, sir. And he'll take his coat off. Will Bully put his coat back on around the corner? Probably. Am I going to chase him to find out if he does? Am I? Hell, I've got far better things to do than that. But the next time I see Billy and he's got his coat on, I'm going to say, Billy, that's twice. Please, come on. And I'm going to, what my deputy wanted was for them to do it once and once only. And if they then failed again, he wanted to punish them. And I tried to, and I said to him, no, we're going to nudge them. We're going to nudge. And we made tell them 16 times to do the same thing. But then eventually they're going to look at us, see us before we've had a chance to speak and go, sorry, sir, coat, I forgot. And then we've won and they've made a choice and they're going to own that choice. And I said, come on, it's unconditional positive regard. And he went, what's that? And I went, oh, I get it. I just haven't gone back and revisited the fact that we're not going to win every battle. We're going to lose some. We're going to win the war because they're going to do well once they leave us, but we're not going to win every battle. And so it's lots of deliberate decisions. It's lots of, an advert for Passmores says there are easier places to work than this school. That's the first line in it. The first line in the advert, there are easier places to work in this school, but there will be very few more rewarding. That's the first sentence, because I don't want staff to come to us if they're not going to feel that they belong. We all should feel that we belong. Just before October half term at the start of the year, I see all of the new teachers. I have a coffee with them and tea with them, and I say, who doesn't love the school yet? Who's struggling still? And I'd always have some, and normally they're struggling with behaviour. That's the normal things. And I'd say, okay, I get that. You need to be consistent and relentless. And when they come back after the holidays, they'll believe that you're still here for them and they'll be a little bit better. And then when you're back after Christmas, they'll go, oh, they're still here. And then they'll suddenly start to not give you the grief they've given you because they want to know you give a damn. And I always offer for them to leave. I say, if anybody's here now, you're supposed to give me half a term's notice. I'm not going to hold you to that. If you don't want to come back after October half term because it's making you miserable, then don't come back. But please tell me you're not coming back. I've only ever had 2 people say they're not coming back. Unfortunately, it happened in the same year from the same department. So I had a department of 3 teaching languages that overnight became a department of 1, the head of department. So that didn't make me very popular. I don't think there's necessarily a teacher that's struggling in a school is a bad teacher. Just they're in the wrong environment. And for me, my staff belonging is just as important as the students belonging. But that's why in a really tough school, in a really tough environment, the staff turnover at Passmores is non-existent. We may lose 1 or 2 members of staff a year, maybe out of 350, and they're with us for a long time. That makes them really bloody expensive, unfortunately, because they have to get paid more every year. But, the people that are there, as I would say, they're on the bus. They're on the bus. They're with us. They know it's a journey. They know it's not going to be easy, but they're on the bus.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to take a little pause here, just because we are going to be able to go to some Q&A from people who are here. So if you want to ask a question, just wanted to direct you to send a message in chat to Eleanor Brown specifically, and she will have a look and sort them into themes and then forward them on to me, and I'll ask Vic questions in relation to that. But I just thought I'd come to, I suppose, we've got a group of people here who are either interested in mindfulness, or they're mindfulness teachers or practitioners.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has become quite challenging since the pandemic, I would say it's got worse. It's been my experience that it's got worse. Is that even though maybe the need to kind of take care of ourselves as educators has increased in terms of the challenges that people are dealing with in school, that a lot of people don't feel they can make time to do something like learn mindfulness, for example, or any other things that kind of help and support with taking care of themselves. I'm just wondering, what would your, not necessarily to the mindfulness practitioners and teachers here, but what would your advice be to teachers who struggle to make time for their own self-care and well-being?
We have teachers in that position. I have staff that I see there that arrive to school well before me and leave well after me. I see that, and I do. It does worry me. I guess that the problem you have with those conversations is they are probably the most bloody minded people you're going to have a conversation with, because they don't see that they're doing themselves damage. They don't see the long term impact of that. And for me, I've always tried to be honest about the mistakes I've made with my own health over the years. The choices I've made about putting other people first, but actually, the phrase, you put your own oxygen mask on first, that sort of thing, and having those conversations, just being honest. I'm honest with the staff that during lockdown my anxiety got so bad that I needed to be medicated. I'm honest that our caretaker died of COVID, and he probably caught that at school, and I live with that every day. And so I probably work more because of some of the things I feel that I've done badly over the course of years. I've not done as well as the others have done, and so it's just about honest. I think there's another piece of reading, a book by Kim Scott called Radical Candor, and I talked to the staff. Again, it's one of my plate spinners. I talked to the staff about caring deeply and caring deeply enough to be honest. That's the key thing for me. If I'm gonna hold, I've been at Passmores 24 years now. My wife works there. Some of my best friends in the world work there. I've worked with them for 24 years, but I'm the boss, and I have to hold them to account. I have to have expectations of them, and sometimes I have to have a conversation with, that didn't go very well, did it? If I can't do that to a friend, if I'm not in a position where my friend is going to be willing to accept the fact that I'm there to say this hasn't gone very well, and they're going to accept that from me because they know I give a damn about them. And I give a damn enough to say we can do better together. It's about that, living in that space where you as my friend will accept the fact I'm going to have to say some things that are going to be difficult professionally, but personally we can have a different conversation. And it's about truthfulness. The big thing for me with those staff is this is what my worries are. This is what I've seen happen to other people, to me, whoever it might be. This is why I'm now worried about you, and I'm going to be honest, and I could even say, and it's not even in my best interest as a teacher to see you work yourself to death, because then you'll be off ill and I'll have to find another teacher. So from that perspective, it's not good either. Most school staff are there because they want to help children. And the moment you can have a conversation by going, you being ill is not helping children, you not being in school is not helping children. So if you want to live your why of helping children, your what on your how has got a copy as well. In other words, I'm going to look after myself. I'm going to put my own oxygen mask on first before I put somebody else's on. But it's about honesty.
Yeah. So it also, from that, sounds like there's a kind of walk your talk stuff around, if we're all about caring for each other, we need to care for ourselves too. Yeah.
And it is being honest. It's that, as I say, that radical candor where everybody knows how deeply we care, and so therefore I care enough to hold you to account for whatever you're doing, be that you're not looking after yourself or whatever it is. Passmores is interesting. So obviously we've just had all the choices for next year come out for parents. There's six secondary schools in Harlow. Passmores' results tend to be about 4th out of the 6, because we refuse to do the EBAC. For those that know what that is, we refuse to make children do a language. If they want to do Brick Lane, they do Brick Lane. So we're never going to be very high up. So we're 4th out of 6. Now, normally you would expect that parental choice would be the top 3 schools going to get more choices. We get head and shoulders the most applications every year for places, by far, by miles, by hundreds of students. And why is that? And I say this to the heads quite often. Why is that? Because it's not because of results. Okay, it's got a good from Ofsted, but so is everybody else. So what is it? Well, it's actually that the families and the community know that we give a shit, know that we care, know that if their child needs support, they're going to get it. If their child falls over, we're going to pick them up. And if they fall over again, we're going to pick them up again. But we're also at some point going to say, can I teach you how not to fall over, please? Because that will make life easier. That for us is why the school remains popular, not because of exam results. It's because of a level of care, and actually getting staff to understand that's care at all levels. It's a plate spinner, Faiy. It's one of those ones that no matter how often I say to one of my science staff, you don't need to be here this long, don't, your marking is too detailed. That's why it's taking you too long to stop marking so much. That I could have that conversation 20 times, and maybe the 21st time it will sink in. But it is about, keep going back and respinning the plate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose if you're part of a community where everybody's taking care of each other, and you're gonna, and with that candour, you're gonna keep getting that reminder, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, you hope, and also, I if my staff are in the building when it's after dark, they shouldn't be. They should be at home by that point. And I know that dark is early in the winter. That's good. Get home. It's winter. But I have to walk that walk as well. I when my son was at school age, I went to his nativities, I went to his school productions, I went to his football matches, and everybody knew I went because I expect them to go too. That's the way it is. So it's there are times that I reflect back on my work balance and know that I wasn't there for my son sometimes as much as I could have been, but mum was, and I use that as the excuse. And again, it's just being honest with my staff that you're going to regret it. I promise you're going to regret it if you're not there for whatever the event is, to just go.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I have to say that one of the things that I hear more now, which is quite reassuring, is more schools saying, actually that first period you can go and do that sports morning, or you can go and be in that assembly, or you can. So there is more of that happening, I think, which is really great to hear.
I agree. I think there's an element of the staff resources become so precious now for us. It's so hard to get good staff. It's so hard to get any staff in some places that I think the pennies finally dropped is that we can't just recruit our way out of problems. We've got to retain and recruit our way out of shortages. So keeping the staff you've got is key. So I do think that penny's dropped with some leaders now, that actually treat your people well and they'll treat you well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a question here, just looking to see if it's one, might be two questions actually, come in from our lovely participants who are here. So the message is: thanks for your time and insights. Mindfulness is about understanding. Can you talk about any resistance you've encountered to your educational approaches from policymakers? So that's the first question.
That's a great question that is. So firstly, I feel that we've had pressure from the accountability system anyway, Ofsted. Certainly the government has published, previous government, not this one, published plenty of things around having 80% of students sitting the EBAC subjects, having, one of the reason I became ill during lockdown is because we were due an Ofsted. And I was very aware that our results could have led to us not getting a good, getting worse than the good. And so I spent many hours of my life trying to sprinkle glitter on data turds to make them look like they were better than they were. And I was sitting at the kitchen table till 2 a.m. Of course, then if you're sitting at the table till 2 a.m, you're then eating crap out of the cupboard because you need to eat to stay awake, etc., and wasn't looking after myself at all. And that's because our accountability system is wrong and doesn't reward the right behaviours. And in fact, it actively rewards the wrong behaviours. So I feel every day we're pushing against the tide. I feel every day that the system doesn't want schools like ours to be successful or to be held up as successful. However, it's the most successful school in the community, which is all that matters. I have had... Lord Adonis, I don't know if you remember Lord Adonis. Lord Adonis was a Labour and a Conservative minister. He had a particular grievance with me around lockdowns when I wouldn't do online learning for the children when in the first lockdown. That was the push. And of course, the government sent us a load of laptops, and they sent me 63, which was really kind of them. I needed 680, but they sent me 63, which I was really delighted with. And so I just said, I'm not having some children with computers and some not. Some will do the work easier and some won't. So we, on a monthly basis, we're sending out a month's work of work printed off with a self-addressed envelope on it, which once they finished the work, they sent back and we marked and the envelopes went out. Eventually, I managed to find 600 and something laptops from a variety of sources so we could move to online learning. But he held me up as low expectations, the soft bigotry of low expectations, I think, is the phrase where, your poor children, because they're poor, you don't think they can do work at home. And that wasn't the reason at all. I just wasn't willing to allow some to have work and have the luxury of a laptop and others not. So I feel that every day we push, the system is not set up to reward inclusion. The system is not set up to reward compassion. The system is set up to reward attainment. It's who can jump the highest is what reward is. Not I start in a pit and you start on a ramp. That doesn't matter. So for me, I think every day we buck the system, and that's partly how we stay collegiate, because when you're sticking it to the man, and it feels like you've got some comrades. So I think that probably helps us too a little bit, But every day, I think we're pushing back against the tide. I'm hoping that this government follows through on what it says it's going to follow through, and actually makes schools, rewards inclusion, rewards compassion in schools. My jury is still out. They seem to want an evolution, and I voted for revolution. So I want them to change things more quickly, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the secondary part to that question, I just wonder whether there is anything. But it was if there is, if you encounter resistance to kind of your educational approach, are there things that you don't agree with but you understand?
Yeah, I guess uniform is an interesting one for me. We have a really the whole town, 6 secondary schools, all have the same style of uniform: blazer shirt tie, traditional, blah blah blah. Whereas I wouldn't get rid of uniform, because it's a leveler for our children. My son hated non-uniform days at secondary school, even though he could have every label he needed. He had me and his mum, both. We're not poor, but he hated them because it made the difference. It showed difference. My son was tall and lean, and so it made him feel taller and leaner. And so for me, we're going to move. I would love to move to the hardest wearing trousers you can find, which is jeans. So let's make jeans uniform. And if we're worried about white shirts becoming grey, let's not have white shirts. Let's have grey shirts. So for me, that there's resistance to that change. My governors are not happy with that. They want to stick to the tradition. We'll stand out differently to everybody else, which I get, and I've got to win some hearts and minds. The easiest one is I've got a survey out with parents at the moment who are all filling it in, and guess what they're saying? They don't want blazer shirt and tie. They don't want badges galore. So for me, I've had a few occasions where the pushback has made me reassess. Often when you end up in the Daily Mail, I've been in the Daily Mail far too many times. So much so that we now have a leadership phrase at Passmores is, does it pass the Daily Mail test? And we don't care if it doesn't, but we just need to be ready for it in case they come calling, because they're not. But so I guess we have had that pushback, but I think in most cases there's been a good reason for that, and we've tried to stop and reflect on that to see if we're right, because we don't necessarily think we are going to be right all the time. I think people want people to be happy, though, generally. So that's what we strive. We strive for safe, happy children, and so it's quite hard to disagree with that. Ofsted are frightened of us because they walk in and see 20 kids with ear defenders on, 3 kids in motorised wheelchairs, etc., 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 and they go, bloody hell, this is not a normal environment. And I go, great, isn't it? It's absolutely great. And they spend most of their time going, I don't really know what to think. That I'm good with that. I'm good with having them on the back foot.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of it's very different, of course, from kind of a lot of what people say in education is kind of the approach, and it's kind of, I think it takes a bit of courage to kind of do this, and continue to do this, because obviously you've been doing it for a long time.
I now have paid my mortgage though, so I feel a little bit more robust, because if they come for me, I've got a maths degree, so I'll always have a job. So that's how I view it. I've got a roof to live under, and if I needed to, I could go and be a maths teacher. So I think I've probably got a little bit more carte blanche and stuff. I'm very fortunate that the most important people in leading our school are not people in the school. It's the trustees and the governors who allow us to do what we need to do, who accept the fact when I say we're going to have minus 0 point whatever progress 8 score, and that's going to put us in the bottom 500 schools in the country or whatever it might be. And I say that to my trustees, and they go, okay, we can see there are other greater reasons for that. That's a remarkable thing from them. Do you know what I mean? That they allow us to do what we need to do, but also accept the fact that the consequences of not doing what we've been asked to do can sometimes be painful, and they'll help us through that. So as much as they're not the people sitting here, the chair of my trust is not the person sitting here, he actually empowers everything we do by having the attitudes they have. So if you're a governor, if you're involved in a community thing, don't underestimate your importance.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's also a real call to action, isn't it, for all governors and trustees that are out there kind of working with schools.
Yeah, and if you get the chance to be a governor and influence, you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed how much you can influence. You will. You'll be amazed how much you can influence, because head teachers are wary of their governing bodies and their trust boards because they employ them. And actually that relationship, having a bit of tension in it, is a good thing.
Yeah. So I've got another question, and of course there's obviously kind of like, you know, we're all here as kind of mindfulness practitioners, and at the heart of mindfulness practice, of course, is compassion. But there's just kind of like, you know, it's around cultivating awareness of how we are in relationship to ourselves and with other people. And I just wonder whether you can kind of see a place for mindfulness in schools.
It's interesting. So I obviously, I've looked at your website, I've looked at a variety of things to try and educate myself in this, because you'll have heard this before. Mindfulness was colouring in as far as I was concerned. Do you know what I mean? It was, I'll go and buy my mindfulness book and it's some lovely felt tips and I'll be away. But I know that's not what it is, and I'm really aware of that. And I look at some of the things we do. So we've got post-COVID, the long shadow of COVID, which is going to be with us forever. We've got a lot more dysregulated children in school who struggle to regulate themselves. And just to explain what I mean by that, when I'm driving to work, if somebody cuts me up, I may have a shout and a swear at them in my car, but probably by the time I've got to work, I'm fine. That's out of my system. I go and get on with my day. For that young person waking up hungry or dirty or being shouted at, who become dysregulated before school, they're probably going to be dysregulated all day. Unless we actively give them the chance to regulate themselves, they're probably going to stay dysregulated all day. And they're going to find that they're going to run into, probably in their first lesson, in their first interaction, it's going to go wrong and they're going to end up out of class. So we have more than we've ever had in that sort of dysregulation space. So we've got a space in school, it's called the Den, and those young people are entrusted with a card to manage themselves. So if they are feeling dysregulated, if they feel that they play the card, they just put the card on the desk and they leave, and they go to the space where, you know, we've got a variety of things to help them with. You know, they can sit and talk, they can have 5 minutes. We've got mood wheels where if they can't communicate with us, they can point where they are, you know, zones of regulation, all those sorts of things that I'm sure lots of you come across. Actually, when they get there, what's our therapy for those young people? What are we doing to help them regulate? I'm not certain we're doing enough. I think there's elements of them understanding themselves. You know, we teach our students around the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex. We talk about the fact that when they're under pressure, their blood flows to different parts of their brains, and to get it back from that part of the brain to the part of the brain which is about thinking. Well, you can give yourself a squeeze, you can lean, you can do all sorts of things. Putting pressure on yourself lowers your blood pressure, etc. It's about our honesty with our students with that. But I think, and it's something I need to educate myself on, is time's important, of course it is, but are there active decisions we can make which will help them? Active decisions in how they manage that, which can help them. And I wonder where mindfulness fits in with their knowledge of themselves and how they manage themselves, but also for the staff as well. I think it's a stressful job, and actually getting people to understand that they've got some more control than they think they have in those spaces if they practice. I think there's definitely a space for that. The problem is finding the space. That's the problem in schools, because they're so busy places. So for me to to upskill the staff, upskill myself, and then to work out how we put that in context. That's a time that you're not doing something else at the moment, and finding that's the key.
Yeah, I mean, wanted just to say that I feel like I'm sort of trying to sell mindfulness here, but I don't know, I can see that you kind of where it could fit and how it would be helpful. But the myriad research that was out a couple of years ago showed a reduction in teacher burnout for staff that learned this, and an improvement in whole school culture. Yeah. And we know from other research that improved whole school culture has an impact on wellbeing and mental health of young people. So it's kind of a win-win for us. And we just hope that more schools and heads of academy trusts can see that over time. But we recognise that challenge around time, for sure.
It's interesting. So I obviously have told staff that I'm doing this today. I was in briefing this morning, talking about what our day looks like. And I said, I've got this evening. And I was really surprised how many staff were interested. Because it's not something I've actively spoken about, if I'm honest. And so when I spoke about it, I said, I've kindly been offered to go and do some training, etc., etc. It was a surprising reaction to, I'd like to. We've done positive psychology in the past, which I don't know if you've come across that phrase. We've done positive psychology in the past, which was helpful to a degree, but actually we need to probably respin that plate. But so there is reach out there. You are reaching out there. People are understanding that looking after themselves. Interestingly, they were younger staff. And maybe there's some openness around that. Maybe they're less cynical, but there were staff in their 20s rather than staff in their 40s. And I don't know if that's different.
Yeah. Well, something to explore, maybe. Definitely interesting.
Maybe millennials are more open to it. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Vic, and really appreciate you being here this evening and talking to us about what you do in your schools, in the trust, and just really refreshing actually to hear your take on things.
Thank you.
So a massive thank you from all of us for being here and giving your time freely for this. So thank you. And
thank you for all those people who hung in there as me waffling on. I appreciate that as well. I hope you have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.